The great diplomatic hall aboard the UES Prometheus had been modified to accommodate representatives from over 50 species. Where once there had been only human architecture, now the chamber incorporated elements from every major civilization in known space. Former Empress Cathera, now simply Representative Cathera of the Zenthari Republic, found herself seated between a methane-breathing Hylaxian and a crystalline Vorkath. Above them, through the transparent ceiling, Earth's supercarrier fleet hung in formation, their massive forms catching the light of Sol. But they were different now. The launch bays that once housed fighters had been converted into diplomatic exchanges. Gardens that once served only humans now grew plants from 100 worlds. The motion before the Galactic Council, announced Council President Sarah Chen, her hair now streaked with gray, is the ratification of the Unified Species Charter. The vote must be unanimous. Thera felt the weight of history as she touched her voting crystal. 10 years ago, she had commanded the most powerful empire in known space. Now she was just one voice among many. And somehow, that felt right. The results are recorded, President Chen continued. The charter is ratified. As of this moment, the Galactic Council is formally established. Applause, or various species equivalents, filled the chamber. Thera watched as the first act of the new council appeared on her display, the commissioning of the Joint Species Supercarrier program. The humans' greatest gift to us wasn't their technology, she found herself saying to the Hylaxian beside her. It was showing us that true power lies in creation, not conquest. The new supercarriers would be different from their predecessors. Each would house communities from multiple species, creating floating cities where cultures could mix and learn from each other. The design incorporated technologies from all member species, Zenthari quantum crystals, Hylaxian bioengineering, Vorkath energy matrices, and human ingenuity to bind it all together. In Earth orbit, Admiral Chen stood with her daughter, Captain Lisa Chen, aboard the observation deck of the Prometheus. They watched as construction began on the first joint species carrier. "Did you ever imagine this?" Lisa asked, gesturing to the diverse crowd of aliens and humans working together on the construction. "When you first ordered the carrier fleet built?" Sarah smiled. "We built them because we feared being alone in a hostile universe. Instead, they became bridges between civilizations. The first of the new joint species carriers already had a name, Unity. Its hull would be inscribed with the new charter's opening words in every known language. The stars belong to no one species, but to all who dream of reaching them. In the decades that followed, the supercarriers evolved from symbols of human independence into harbingers of interstellar cooperation. They became universities where species studied together, markets where cultures traded freely, and forums where civilizations found common ground. Cathera's final act before retiring from the council was to commission a historical marker near Earth. It read, "Here humanity showed us that the greatest power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to create, the courage to trust, and the strength to show mercy." The supercarriers remained, now patrolling the stars not as weapons of war, but as guardians of peace and bridges between worlds. They stood as eternal monuments to the day humanity proved that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't technology or weapons, but the ability to imagine a better future and the will to make it real. Admiral Zextal struggled to maintain his composure as the Zenthari diplomatic shuttle passed through the massive entry bay of the UES Prometheus. The bay alone could have accommodated an entire Imperial strike fleet, yet it was merely one of dozens lining the supercarrier's hull. "By the Eternal Crown," whispered cultural attaché Miratex beside him. "They have a maglev transit system just in their landing bay." Their shuttle touched down with practiced precision, guided by the carrier's automated systems. As the delegation disembarked, they found themselves greeted not by a military contingent, but by a civilian wearing what appeared to be formal academic robes. "Welcome aboard the Prometheus," the human said, bowing slightly. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, Dean of Stellar Political Sciences at our shipboard university. If you'll follow me, I'll show you to the diplomatic center." Zextol's secondary hearts nearly stopped. "Shipboard University." "Oh yes," Dr. Chen replied as she led them toward a sleek maglev car. "Each supercarrier hosts a complete university system. We find it essential for long-term deployments and continuing education of both our military and civilian personnel." The car glided silently through the carrier's interior. They passed vast hydroponics gardens where children played among fruit trees, research laboratories with equipment that made the Imperial Science Academy look primitive, and what appeared to be a full-scale shopping district. Imperial Intelligence Officer Kexby activated her concealed scanner, disguised as a ceremonial bracelet. The device immediately went dead. "I apologize," a pleasant artificial voice announced from nowhere, "but scanning devices are automatically disabled within the Prometheus. For security purposes, you understand. However, we'd be happy to provide you with our public technical specifications." Zextol noticed Dr. Chen hiding a small smile. The humans had anticipated every form of espionage and countered it with casual efficiency. The diplomatic center turned out to be a vast chamber with a transparent ceiling showing the stars above. Representatives from what appeared to be dozens of human nations waited for them around a circular table. "Before we begin," announced a silver-haired human who introduced himself as Admiral Chen, "would you like a tour of our educational facilities? We're particularly proud of our children's zero-gravity ballet recital this evening." Zextol felt his mandibles twitch. These humans weren't just showing off their military might. They were demonstrating that their supercarriers were entire self-contained civilizations. The message was clear. You can't intimidate a society that carries its cities with it. "Tell me, Admiral Chen," Zextol managed, "why carriers? Why not traditional battleships?" The human admiral's eyes twinkled. "Because, Admiral Zextol, we learned long ago that true power isn't about the size of your guns. It's about carrying your civilization with you, wherever you go. Each of our carriers is a piece of Earth, a fragment of humanity sailing among the stars. They're not just warships. They're our commitment to ensuring humanity will survive and thrive, no matter what challenges we face." As if to emphasize his point, a group of school children ran past the chamber's window, chasing what appeared to be a holographic space whale through the artificial atmosphere. Zextol realized, with growing dread, that the Empress had critically misunderstood these humans. They hadn't built supercarriers to wage war. They'd built them to ensure they'd never need to. Scout Commander Vexterra slouched in her command chair, mandibles clicking with boredom, as her fleet approached yet another unremarkable solar system. After 3 cycles of finding nothing but primitive civilizations barely capable of reaching their own moons, she had grown weary of these frontier surveys. "Another waste of time," she muttered, watching her crew conduct their standard scans. The system's star was ordinary, its inner planets uninspiring. But as they passed the 4th planet, a red one, her sensor officer suddenly jerked upright. "Commander, I'm detecting massive artificial structures in orbit around the 4th planet." Vexterra's spines bristled. "Show me." The main view screen flickered to life, and for the first time in her career, Vexterra felt her heart skip a beat. Sprawling orbital shipyards stretched across Mars' orbit, their skeletal frames illuminated by the constant flash of industrial plasma welders. Massive vessels under construction dwarfed anything she'd ever seen in the Imperial fleet. Multiple similar complexes detected around the 3rd planet, and by the Empress's crown, there's more around several moons of the 6th planet, her sensor officer reported, voice trembling. Vexterra leaned forward, her boredom forgotten. Classification of those vessels. "They appear to be carriers, Commander. But the scale is unprecedented. Each one could house our entire scout fleet in its launch bays." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The Zenthari Empire prided itself on having the largest capital ships in known space. These vessels made their proudest dreadnoughts look like escape pods. "Check our stealth systems," Vexterra ordered, suddenly very aware of her fleet's vulnerable position. All stealth systems functioning at peak efficiency, Commander. We're completely. A new alert cut through the bridge's tense atmosphere. Vexterra's blood ran cold as she watched a massive vessel materialize from hyperspace, less than 10,000 kilometers from their position. Its emergence was precise, elegant, nothing like the crude hyperspace jumps of lesser species. Impossible, she whispered. They shouldn't be able to detect us through our stealth fields. The vessel's hull seemed to stretch endlessly, its surface dotted with launch bays that could each accommodate a Zenthari cruiser. Gardens were visible through massive transparent sections, and entire cities seemed to gleam within its superstructure. Commander, her communications officer called out, "We're receiving a transmission. In perfect Imperial standard. Put it through." Zenthari Scout Fleet, a calm human voice announced, "This is the UES Hyperion. Your stealth systems were detected by our quantum grid the moment you entered the system. We've been tracking you since. Please maintain your current position." Vexterra's claws dug into her command chair's arms. Not only had these humans achieved the impossible with their massive carriers, but they'd also completely nullified the Empire's most advanced stealth technology. "Send an emergency transmission to Imperial Command," she ordered, her voice barely steady. "Priority 1. The humans. They're not what we thought they were. There's so much more." As she watched smaller carriers launch from the Hyperion's base, each one still larger than her flagship, Vexterra realized she was witnessing something historic. The moment the Zenthari Empire discovered it was no longer the most powerful force in the galaxy. Grand Admiral Vexterra of the Imperial Home Fleet watched as 10,000 Zenthari warships emerged from hyperspace near Sol. Behind her, Empress Thera stood on the command deck of the flagship Eternal Dominion, her scales dark with barely contained rage. "So this is Earth," the Empress hissed. "And where are their magnificent carriers? Where is their fleet of legends?" The solar system appeared empty. Scans showed civilian traffic having evacuated hours ago, but no military presence. The massive shipyards orbiting Mars, Venus, and Jupiter's moons stood silent. "Perhaps they fled, my Empress," Vexterra suggested, though her combat instincts screamed that something was wrong. "No," Cathera smiled. "They were bluffing. 200 supercarriers. Impossible. We'll burn their worlds and..." Space rippled. Not in one place, but everywhere. Vexterra's tactical display erupted with warnings as 200 hyperspace windows opened simultaneously around her fleet. The precision of the maneuver was breathtaking. Each supercarrier emerged at exactly the same moment, forming a perfect spherical formation that enclosed the entire Imperial armada. "Impossible," Cathera shrieked. "No fleet can coordinate a hyperspace jump that precisely." But they had. 200 supercarriers, each one larger than the Eternal Dominion, hung in space like a constellation of artificial worlds. Their massive forms blotted out the stars from view. "Imperial Fleet, this is Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force," a calm voice transmitted on all frequencies. "Your formation is surrounded. Power down your weapons." The Empress laughed manically. "We still outnumber them 50 to 1. Launch all fighters. Fire all." Her voice died as the supercarrier's launch bays opened in synchronization. But instead of fighters, each bay emitted a spreading cloud of what looked like metallic dust. "Quantum Menites," Vexterra's science officer whispered in horror. "They've weaponized quantum Menites." The clouds spread rapidly, enveloping the Imperial ships. Where they touched, weapon systems went dark. Engines powered down, but life support and artificial gravity remained untouched. "As you can see," Admiral Chen's voice continued, "we could have ended this more permanently. The nanites could have disassembled your ships atom by atom. Instead, they're programmed only to disable military systems." Vexterra watched as the tactical display showed ship after ship going dark. The most powerful fleet in Imperial history, neutralized in minutes without a single shot fired. "Your Empress convinced you we couldn't possibly have 200 supercarriers," Chen continued. She was wrong. She told you that your technological superiority made victory certain. She was wrong about that too. Look around you. See what humanity can achieve when we work together. The supercarriers began launching their smaller carriers, then fighters, until the Imperial fleet was surrounded by a swirling dance of aerospace craft that numbered in millions. It was a demonstration not just of military power, but of logistics, coordination, and technological sophistication that the Empire had never imagined possible. Now then, Chen concluded, shall we discuss terms for a more civilized future? In the silence that followed, Vexcara realized she was witnessing the end of an era. The Eternal Dominion had finally met a force it couldn't dominate, and the universe would never be the same. Fleet Admiral Chen stood before the assembled Zenthari delegation in the Prometheus's Grand Archive Chamber, where holographic displays showed the history of human space exploration. The Zenthari representatives, still shaken from their fleet's defeat at New Eden, watched with a mixture of fear and curiosity. 200 years ago, Chen began, gesturing to a hologram of an ancient radio telescope. We detected your empire's expansion. Not your ships or colonies, but the void where your stealth systems blocked background radiation. You were invisible, but the silence spoke volumes. The hologram shifted to show early human space stations. We knew we couldn't match your quantum crystalline technology or your faster-than-light innovations, so we didn't try. Instead, we asked ourselves one question. How do you defeat an enemy that's technically superior in every way? Cultural attaché Miratex leaned forward. You built the carriers. No, Chen smiled. First, we built communities. The earliest orbital habitats taught us how to sustain human life in space indefinitely. The Mars colonies showed us how to terraform environments. The asteroid mining operations proved we could manufacture anything, anywhere. The display showed the construction of the first supercarrier. The carriers came later, when we realized we needed to make our civilization mobile. Every major advancement in human history came from our ability to move. Nomadic tribes, sailing ships, railways. Space wouldn't be any different. But why keep them secret? Asked one of the Zenthari scientists. Such achievements. Because we needed you to underestimate us, interrupted Dr. Sarah Chen, stepping forward. Every carrier we built looked like a civilian habitat from the outside. Every technological advancement was disguised as primitive industrial expansion. We hid in plain sight, knowing your empire's prejudices would do our work for us. The hologram now displayed the current fleet of supercarriers. Each carrier is designed to operate independently for decades. They carry universities because we need to educate the next generation. They have hydroponics and manufacturing because we need to be self-sufficient. They house families because we learned long ago that soldiers fight harder when they're protecting their homes. And the nested carrier design? Asked a Zenthari admiral, mandibles twitching. Inspired by nature, Dr. Chen replied. Like Russian nesting dolls, or the way small fish hide within schools of larger fish. Each layer provides protection and multiplication of force. But more importantly, it means no single loss can cripple us. Fleet Admiral Chen's expression grew serious. We built the carriers because we knew that someday, humanity would face an empire that believed technological superiority meant cultural superiority. We needed ships that could carry not just weapons, but our entire civilization. Because the only way to ensure humanity's survival was to make sure that wherever our ships went, Earth went with them. The Zenthari delegation sat in stunned silence as they finally understood. Humans hadn't just built a fleet. They'd created a civilization that could never be truly defeated because it could never be truly pinned down. So you see, Chen concluded, the carriers aren't our response to your empire. They're our response to the fundamental challenge of space itself, how to remain human when humanity's cradle is light years away. Governor Laxfren of the Zenthari Outer Colonies stood before the holographic transmitter, his violet scales shimmering with nervous energy. Behind him, representatives from 30 colony worlds waited in tense silence. The transmission connected, and the image of a human diplomatic chamber materialized. Honorable representatives of Earth, Laxfrin began, his translator working flawlessly. We speak to you not as enemies, but as potential allies. We have watched your carriers demonstrate what true power looks like, power tempered by mercy. On the other end of the transmission, the human parliament's emergency session fell silent. Prime Minister Yusuf Martinez leaned forward, his dark eyes studying the alien delegation. You're aware that opening this channel constitutes treason against your Empress. The Empress. Laxfrin's secondary breathing vents flared. She keeps our worlds in perpetual poverty while claiming it's for our own protection. But your supercarriers showed us the truth, that technological advancement and cultural preservation can go hand in hand. In the Imperial Palace, Empress Cthulhu received word of the transmission and shattered her crystalline throne in fury. Deploy the home fleet, crush these traitors. But as her commanders rushed to comply, more reports flooded in. 60 more colony worlds had declared independence. The Outer Rim Defense Fleet had refused orders to fire on civilian targets. And most shocking of all, 3 Imperial Academy worlds had pledged allegiance to the rebellion. Back in the human parliament, the debate raged. We cannot interfere in alien civil matters, argued the defense minister. Our carriers are for protection, not intervention. But they're asking for our help precisely because we showed restraint, countered Admiral Chen. They saw us disable 300 ships without casualties. They want that kind of civilization. The debate was interrupted by new intelligence. The Empress had ordered the use of prohibited quantum weapons against rebel worlds, weapons that would shatter entire planets to maintain her control. Governor Laxfrin's next transmission was desperate. We don't ask for military intervention. We ask for sanctuary. Let us study your way of life. Show us how to build communities among the stars. Prime Minister Martinez stood, his decision made. We will not fight your civil war, he announced. But we offer this. Any civilian ship fleeing imperial persecution may dock with our carriers. Any world seeking to learn our methods of self-sufficient space habitation will receive our aid. And any imperial ship using banned weapons will face our full defensive capabilities. The Parliament chamber erupted in debate again, but Martinez raised his hand. We built our carriers to preserve human civilization. But civilization means nothing if we turn our backs on those seeking to build something better. As the transmission ended, Laxfrin turned to his fellow rebels. Across 30 worlds, billions of Zenthari watched their feeds. They offer us neither weapons nor warriors, he said. They offer us something far more powerful. They offer us hope. In orbit above Earth, 30 supercarriers received new orders. Prepare for civilian evacuation operations. Their vast cities would soon welcome the first alien civilians in human history, not as conquests, but as refugees seeking a better way of life. Imperial Strike Commander Naxher watched his fleet of 300 warships exit hyperspace near the human colony of New Eden. He expected to find a handful of defensive vessels, perhaps even one of their vaunted supercarriers. What he didn't expect was silence. Scanning for defensive installations, his sensor officer announced, "Nothing." The colony appears undefended. Naxher's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The Empress will be pleased. Launch fighters and begin the attack run. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected. His tactical officer shouted. Energy readings are impossible. Space itself seemed to tear open as 30 human supercarriers emerged simultaneously, their massive forms casting shadows across New Eden's surface. Each vessel was positioned with mathematical precision, forming a perfect 3-dimensional containment grid around the Imperial fleet. By the Eternal Crown, Naxher whispered, "Launch all fighters. Begin evasive." He never finished the order. The supercarriers' launch bays opened in perfect synchronization, but instead of fighters, each bay released what appeared to be smaller carriers, each one still larger than his flagship. Secondary carriers deploying fighter wings, his sensor officer reported, voice shaking. Tertiary carriers emerging from the secondary carriers. They're launching their own squadrons. The tactical display became a maze of nested deployment patterns. Each supercarrier had launched 10 secondary carriers. Each secondary carrier deployed 5 tertiary carriers, and each of those released hundreds of fighters. The mathematical progression was staggering. 90,000 fighter craft detected and rising. The sensor officer announced, "Their deployment pattern. It's like watching a flower bloom in space." A transmission cut through their command channel. "Imperial Strike Fleet, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. Your attack on a civilian colony violates 3 separate articles of interstellar law. Power down your weapons and prepare to be escorted out of human space." Naxxer's spines bristled at the human's calm tone. "We are the Imperial Strike Fleet. We do not surrender to." His words died as the first wave of human fighters executed a maneuver that should have been impossible. They flew through his formation in a complex, interwoven pattern that somehow avoided all point defense fire while precisely disabling the weapons on 30 Imperial ships. "Commander," his engineering officer called out, "they're not using standard weapon systems. Each fighter is equipped with targeted EMP devices. They're disabling our ships without destroying them." The second and third waves struck before Naxxer could respond. He watched in horror as his fleet's weapon systems went dark, ship by ship, with surgical precision. Not a single Imperial vessel was destroyed, but none remained combat capable. "Final count," his tactical officer reported numbly. 300 Imperial warships disabled. 0 casualties on either side. They defeated us without killing anyone." As Naxxer stared at the swarm of fighters now forming a massive terrestrial defense symbol visible from the colony's surface, he understood. The humans hadn't just outfought them. They humiliated them with mercy. "Send the surrender signal," he ordered quietly, "and send a message to the Empress. Tell her we never stood a chance." Empress Cathera's crystalline throne crackled with energy as her rage manifested in arcs of purple lightning. The throne room's organic architecture seemed to pulse in response to her fury, its bioluminescent veins flaring with each burst of her anger. "Show me the scans again," she commanded, her voice deceptively quiet. The holographic display materialized once more, showing the detailed analysis of Earth's supercarriers. The Imperial Advisory Council shifted uncomfortably as their Empress's upper eyes narrowed to slits. "Explain to me," Cathera said, rising from her throne, "how a species that hasn't even mastered quantum crystalline technology has managed to build vessels that make our Imperial dreadnoughts look like mining shuttles." High Admiral Zextal stepped forward, his ceremonial armor catching the light of the throne room's living walls. "My Empress, our analysis suggests they've taken an entirely different technological path. While we focused on energy manipulation and crystalline computing, they've perfected gravitational engineering and modular construction techniques we never considered viable." "Never considered viable." Cathera spat the words. "Then our considerations were wrong, weren't they, Admiral?" The hologram shifted to show the internal layout of a human supercarrier. Entire decks dedicated to hydroponic farming, fusion reactors that could power small planets, and launch bays that operated with clockwork precision. "Look at this," First Scientist Neoveth interjected, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and admiration. "They've solved the atmospheric containment problem not through shield technology, but through layered physical barriers and redundant systems. It's elegant in its simplicity." Cathera's tail lashed violently. "I don't want to hear about elegance. I want to know why our intelligence networks failed to notice them building 200 of these monsters." The council chamber fell silent. Finally, Imperial Spymaster Krelvin cleared his throat. "They built them in plain sight, my Empress. Our agents dismissed the construction as primitive space stations and orbital habitats. We never imagined they were building modular sections of supercarriers." "Never imagined," Cathera echoed, her voice dripping with venom. "It seems there's a lot we never imagined about these humans, like their ability to detect our most advanced stealth systems." She walked through the hologram, studying the supercarrier's massive engines. Do you know what truly infuriates me? They didn't steal this technology. They didn't reverse engineer it from crashed ships or ancient ruins. They built this themselves, from nothing but their own ingenuity and determination. The Empress turned to face her council, all four arms clasped behind her back. They've made us look like fools. Worse, they've made us look weak. How long before our subjugated worlds learn that our superior technology has been surpassed by a species we dismissed as primitive? What are your orders, Empress? High Admiral Zextal asked quietly. Cthera's mouth tentacles writhed as she smiled, an expression that made several council members step back. Prepare a diplomatic delegation. Let's see these supercarriers up close. And if diplomacy fails, her eyes gleamed with dangerous intent, we'll show these humans that size isn't everything in warfare. As her council hurried to carry out her orders, Cthera returned to her throne, watching the hologram of Earth's mighty fleet. She had to admit, somewhere beneath her rage, there was a flicker of something else: respect.